one of our members of Congress from LA would host 3 meetings, then we would really saturate the community. So it was encouraging to do that with her, and appreciate the people who came out and the questions that they asked. What I want to do tonight is give you a quick presentation on what's new happening in 2020 and kind of why things are new in 2020 and how we got to where we are. But I want to preface that by saying that tomorrow is 88 days away from the March 3rd presidential primary election. So this is happening. So I know that there are lots of questions and there are lots of opinions about how we got where we are and where we are going forward, but this is happening in the March election. So I want to focus on how we can best prepare ourselves and prepare our constituents for how the election is going to be run in 2020. And we're at the county very excited about this. This has been a work of service and kind of trying to think what's the right word for it. It's something that we've been working on for over a decade, or close to a decade, in LA County. And we've really focused our efforts on looking at this through the lens of the voter experience. So when we started this project, it was in recognition that the IncaVote Plus voting system that we use in LA County and have used in LA County was at the end of its life cycle and needed to be replaced, but also recognition that there was not a voting system available on the market, and at that time, back in 2009, also the regulatory environment around voting in the state of California and in the country was very dysfunctional. So at the federal level, we had a U.S. Elections Assistance Commission that was established after the Bush v. Gore election in 2000, but in 2009, that commission was essentially defunct because it had no commissioners, because the appointments for the commissioners were stuck in the Senate in partisan gridlock. That's the commission that establishes the federal standards for voting systems in this country. And those standards haven't been updated for many years, over a decade. And part of that is because there hasn't been a quorum on the board to make those. It's not that there hasn't been work done on that, it's that there wasn't a quorum for the governing body to actually adopt that. So California kind of stepped forward to lead in that and said, we can't wait for that to get stabilized, we can't wait for new federal standards, and the federal standards are voluntary anyway. So California, under a bill that was authored by then State Senator Alex Padilla, adopted updated voting standards for the state of California in SB 360. And that really established California as having some of the strongest voting system standards in the country. Our standards are higher. We hold our voting systems in California to a higher standard than is required under the federal voluntary voting system guidelines. So again, we started by looking at IncaVote being at the end of its life cycle. If you think about that through the lens of the voting experience, if you think about what it's like for voters to walk into a polling place and vote, the voting system we've been using in LA County is the same experience as it was when punch card voting was first introduced in 1968, the year that Bobby Kennedy was on the ballot. And that's still the way the voters experience voting when they show up on election day in LA County. Now, a lot of things have changed behind the scenes. There's been a lot of updates. We've moved from punch card to inking the ballot, but the device itself is the same thing that was used for punch cards, and the tabulation equipment, the tally devices that you actually run those ballot cards through are retrofitted versions of that equipment from 1968. So it is very much at the end of its life cycle and in need of replacement. In fact, the hardware for counting those ballots, they don't make it anymore, and there's only one company that we've been able to find that can maintain that equipment. So we definitely needed to upgrade in LA County. But beyond that, the system also had limitations for serving a community like LA County. We have 5.4 million registered voters in LA County. Just to put that into perspective, we have more voters in this county than 42 of the states have statewide. So we function as a local government, but we're larger than most state governments in the country. So the fact is, voting system manufacturers don't build systems for a jurisdiction like LA County. We're considered high risk, we're considered high demand, and they're going to make their money, their profits, by going to the hundreds and thousands of mid-sized and smaller counties that exist throughout the country. So recognizing that there was not a voting system available for us to simply do a traditional procurement and replacement program to replace what we have, we stepped out and said, look, we can't wait any longer. We can't wait for the regulatory environment to stabilize. We can't wait for the market to come up with a solution for us. We in LA County are going to have to come up with a solution that will work for our community. And so we started what at that time was called the Voting Systems Assessment Project. And we spent several years doing a lot of research. We convened a stakeholder advisory committee that established a set of principles to guide the project. We brought in a technical advisory committee with experts on security, on usability, on what am I missing? All right, so usability, security, accessibility, and a number of people who were nationally recognized to guide us in that process. And then we entered into a partnership with a human-centered design firm called IDEO, which is out of the Bay Area, that specializes in designing systems around the user experience. So we started again by looking at it through the lens of what's it like for that voter walking in to vote, and then we back into that the technology and the regulations. So along the course of that 9 to 10 years, we had several legislative changes that took place, and we developed what you see now and this is just one piece, I'll talk about that in a minute, and we migrated to what we now call the Voting Solutions for All People initiative. And the intent here is to provide a voting experience that does serve the diversity of our community, that recognizes that we have voters who speak multiple languages, and that under the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, we're required under federal law to provide our voting materials in 13 languages. That's the requirement. There are another 5 or 6 languages that we do based on population figures here in Los Angeles County. We also know that we have a large number of voters with disabilities, and previously, if you were a voter with a disability, if you had vision issues or you had mobility issues, your option for voting was to go into a polling place and to use a different piece of equipment than every other voter. And the truth of the matter, and I know we have people here tonight who have served us as poll workers, and I want to thank you for that, but I think the truth of the matter, what we know is that most poll workers on election day cross their fingers and hope that nobody would want to use that piece of equipment because it was less familiar to them and it was different than the rest. But that's not a good way to provide a voting experience for a voter with a disability. Even asking a voter with a disability to have to self-disclose that they have a disability in order to vote independently and vote a secret ballot just flies in the face of the principles of providing a transparent and usable voting experience. So with all of that, we came to what you're going to hear about tonight, and that's the design of the voting solutions for all people. But I also want to share with you just some really important factual information. One of those things is that while we were on this path already, the Secretary of State in February of this year decertified all of the voting systems that did not meet the requirements of those new voting system standards that I talked about. So the reality is that the Inca voting system in LA County that we've had is no longer a viable system starting in 2020. So we are mandated to move to a new voting system. We also are affected by new laws that changed in LA County. You're going to see, and perhaps because you're all so engaged, you probably know this. For many years, our cities and our local districts held their elections on odd years, and some of those independent of the county. They ran their own elections. But the state legislature passed Senate Bill 415, which required, based on low voter turnout, required the cities and the special districts to consolidate their local elections onto the even year ballots with the county. What that did is that increased the capacity of the ballot, the number of contests and the number of measures that will appear on the ballot, and that exceeds the capacity that the Inca vote system was able to provide. So all of that to say that even if we wanted to, even if we all felt comfortable with the Inca vote plus voting system, it's no longer viable because it doesn't have the capacity for the ballot in LA County, and it doesn't meet the voting system standards that were adopted by the legislature. So what we are doing is taking advantage of another law that the legislature passed, which allows us to not just introduce new voting equipment, but introduce an entirely new voting model that moves us away from the single day, single location model that we've had for so long, and expands to now a voting period where voting will be, in-person voting will be available for 11 days leading up to election day. So that means 2 full weekends of in-person voting and continuous through that 11 days. And that allows us to offer voting at any location. So you as a voter now, where you used to have one location to go to on a random Tuesday between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., you now have the option to go to any location in LA County over that 11-day voting period and cast your ballot. And this system allows you to do that in a way that gets you your local ballot. So if you live in Santa Monica, but you work in Culver City, and it's more convenient for you to go on your lunch hour in Culver City, you can go to a vote center and you can get your Santa Monica ballot. If it's more convenient for you to vote on a weekend when you're out doing your shopping or when you're visiting a farmer's market, you'll have the ability to do that. That's responsive to that research phase of the project that I talked about, where we had a lot of feedback from voters saying that in particular in this county, that Tuesday between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. in your local neighborhood was not necessarily the best option for voting. And what we also know demographically in LA County is that definitely didn't serve a lot of underserved communities that are particularly low voter turnout. So the idea behind this, the philosophy behind this, is to meet voters where they are, to take the voting experience, put it out in the community in a visible way, so that during that 11-day voting period, when people are out doing the things that they do in their day-to-day lives, that they're going to see that there's a vote center available to them, and that when they have that intrinsic motivation to participate in the process, that we've met them where they are, and we can and that we can allow them to do that. So if they watched a debate the night before on television and that motivated them to, maybe for the first time, to decide, yes, I want to participate in this election, I want to vote, then our goal is that they're going to see someplace the next day where they can go and cast their ballot. They're not going to have to wait till Tuesday. The other thing that's great about the vote center model is it also allows us to maximize the conditional voter registration law that California passed, which means that not only can people vote at any of these locations, they can register to vote at any of these locations, and they can change their address, they can change their party affiliation. All of those things that used to have to be done 15 days before the election can be accomplished in person at the vote centers. What that means for those of you who are really close to this is it addresses the volume of provisional ballots that we traditionally have in LA County, because provisional ballots is that safety net. And the two main reasons that we have so many provisional ballots in LA County are they fall into two main categories. One is voters went to the wrong polling place, and two, they were issued, or we show that they were issued a vote by mail ballot, but they didn't have that vote by mail ballot to surrender when they showed up to vote on election day, and state law required that you'd have to surrender that. Both of those issues go away under this new system because there are no wrong polling places anymore, because you can vote anywhere in the county. And you no longer have to surrender that vote by mail ballot because we will have real-time access to the voter database, and if we show that you were issued a vote by mail ballot, we can suspend that and issue you a regular ballot right on site. So that's going to significantly decrease the number of provisional ballots that we have.
How many less precincts are there?
Yeah, no, but I'm happy to tell you, the precinct structure still exists. The number of locations changes because, again, no longer for you as a voter, you now, instead of having one location, starting 10 days before the election, so E-11, we will open 250 locations spread out throughout LA County. And at E-4, so that final 4 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, that'll increase to a minimum of 1,000 locations that are open throughout the county. So one other thing before I jump into the details of the vote centers that sometimes I forget to mention this. On top of all that change, there was a law passed specific to LA County. This one only, so far what I've talked about applies to multiple counties. This particular issue is only in LA County, and this is with Senate Bill 25, which for a 3-year period flips the ballot order. So the order of contest on the ballot is going to be completely the opposite of what we've seen in the past in LA County, meaning that the top of your ballot is going to start with your local races. It's going to start with cities, and schools, and local contests. Then it's going to go to county, then it's going to go to state, and then it's going to go to federal. So actually the last thing on your presidential primary ballot is going to be the presidential primary contest, which is intended to increase participation in local contests and to combat what we typically see as a drop-off of down the ballot contests. And I think that's a good thing. With all the other change, I fear a little bit that people are going to walk in or they're going to get their ballot in their mail and they're going to say all these changes and they couldn't even get the president on the ballot because they're going to be looking at that. So part of our messaging is just to inform people of that, to look at it, because it's going to be a long ballot too, because again, it does go from city, school, all the way down to president. A couple of little nuances in the way that was written. Your member of Congress, your member of U.S. Congress, and your state assembly and state senator are actually listed under local offices instead of state offices. So it's a different order than what you've seen before. So just anticipate that and anticipate that there could be questions about that. So vote centers, I think I covered a lot of this already, but the idea of vote centers is the new in-person voting model. They will open, again, starting 11 days before the election. We'll increase the number 4 days before the election. They will be in high visible, accessible locations throughout the county. The intent is to be places that people are familiar with and that have adequate parking and meet accessibility requirements. We went through a very extensive public engagement process, 66 different community meetings in all areas of the county to get feedback on where people would prefer to see these. Very interesting information that we got from that process. We heard from many voters who, not surprising, told us that city halls, public libraries were places that they would associate with being a good voting location, and we will certainly be using a lot of libraries and city halls. But we also heard from voters who told us, look, I would prefer not to vote at a city hall because there's often a police station attached to the city hall, and that may be perceived as a form of intimidation. Or I would rather vote in a retail area, or I'd rather vote at a community center where I'm with my peers and my social group. I would rather make that more of a social engagement. The great thing about this model is that we can offer all of those options. We can have locations that meet those preferences. So again, the idea here is that a voter can self-select the type of location that they want to go to cast their ballot, and a location that they associate with the significance of participating in the elections process.
How many precincts were there in LA County in November 2018? It's the same question.
Can you hold your question, please, until the end?
It's a basic question.
Bruce, hold it until...
I gotta go.
Well, we have many of us have to go. How many people would like to wait to have the questions answered?
It's a basic question.
How many fewer polling places will there be?
80%.
How about that way?
80% fewer.
No, that is not correct.
Well, let's get a number.
Well, do you want to yell at me, or would you like to have an exchange? Because
Hey,
I came
let's
here tonight
Bruce,
to share with you
basic answer.
what is
Knock it
happening.
off, okay?
Excuse me, we
gotta
have a
get this
question
through- we gotta get through
answer
this. This
period
isn't just for you.
after
This is for all
the
of us.
presentation.
You should.
You know,
number.
and I'm
It's a basic
sorry,
question.
this is it. Dean has come out here to explain what's going on. If you can't have the common courtesy to listen and to not shout out like you know who, a whole other party that I know about, you know, we're not shout-outers.
No.
We wait, we're respectful, and when it's a Q&A time, we will call on you. Thank you very much.
Someone please relay the info to me since I have to leave and you don't want to answer the basic questions.
No, I'll answer your question and appreciate how respectful that you asked it. As I said, there will be, in the final 4 days, there will be a minimum of 1,000 locations. And in the last election, there were 4,800 individual polling places that were one per voter. And under this model, any voter can go to, basically any voter has a choice of 1,000 locations to go to over 4 days. Where under the old model, any voter had a choice to go to one place for 1 day on a random Tuesday. That's the difference. And vote by mail is still available to all voters universally.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dean. It's more efficient. Yeah, very efficient.
My head is spinning.
So the next,
Where's my,
pardon me?
could you just clarify, how many, on the last day, how many will there be compared to how many there were?
There will be 1,000 votes, a minimum of 1,000 vote centers.
As compared to?
4,800.
4,800,
Okay,
but
thank
those
you.
4,800 were one
Okay,
per voter.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So, and the way that we're able to do this, I already talked about this a little bit, is that instead of the paper rosters for individual precincts, at these vote centers we will have electronic poll books that have access to the full database. This is what allows us to do same-day voter registration. It allows us to also make sure that you get the correct ballot for your community when you go to the vote center. And it will, again, it'll replace the paper roster. You may recall in the primary in 2018, we had some issues with the paper rosters. This is another way of addressing some of those issues in the process. We are also offering a new feature that is voluntary. This is not required, but we are offering an interactive sample ballot. So in addition to the paper sample ballot that you will all get in the mail, like as you always have, we will offer an electronic version of that sample ballot where you can pre-mark your selections. You can interact with that leading up to the election. Again, recognizing this is a very long ballot, you can pre-mark those selections and create what we call a poll pass, which is on your personal device, or you can print it out, a code that when you come in to use the device, you can scan that in and it'll pre-populate your choices, and then you can go through, review those, and cast your ballot and have an expedited voting experience. That's an option, it's not required, but that was part of what we heard from a lot of voters, is that some way to interact in advance of the election and to be able to go into the voting booth more prepared was preferred. And just to be clear, that poll pass is not your ballot. The voting device creates and uses a paper ballot. That's the official ballot of record. That's what gets counted. That's what is available for audits and recounts. So that electronic version on your phone is really no different than the paper ballot, sample ballot that you would have marked and taken with you to copy at the polling place under the previous model. So that brings us to the ballot marking device, which you see over here, and you'll have a chance, if you wish to interact with tonight. This is the device that will be available at those vote centers, at those 1,000 vote centers. This is designed for access and usability, so it has a number of features. What I first want to emphasize is that it is a ballot marking device. It is not an electronic voting machine. It does not retain or count your votes. It is used to mark a paper ballot. So when you sign in at the vote center, you'll get a blank ballot. You'll put it into the device. It will pull up the ballot that is appropriate to your area. It'll walk you through those contests and measures. And at the end of that, you'll review them on the screen. And then you'll print out the ballot. You'll have a chance to review that printed ballot. And when you're satisfied that that's the way you intended to vote, you will insert that back in and it'll go into a secured ballot box on the back of the device. And the ballots will come back and be counted centrally in our office on a system that's completely independent from these devices. So, and we can get into that in more detail as we go forward. The other features of this that I think are really important to emphasize is that this allows a voter to vote, to select any of the 13 languages that are required in LA County. So contrast that to the old experience where if you needed to translate a ballot, we hung on the booth a list of translations, and you had to flip through that and hold it next to the English edition to get your language. This actually allows you to get your ballot in the language. It prints out your voted ballot in the language that you selected, so your ability to verify that matches the language that you use. It also allows you to toggle back and forth, because what we heard from a lot of voters is that they are fine with the contest and the candidates in English. They're familiar with terms like city council member, state senator, but when it comes to the ballot measures, complex public policy issues, they'd like to be able to review those in their original language. So this allows them to toggle back and forth on that. It has a number of accessibility features. You can change the font size. You can enlarge the font size for vision assistance. You can change the contrast on the screen. You can listen to the ballot using the headphones and mark your choices. Or if you're blind or have low vision, if you want to, you can turn the screen off completely and use the headphones and use the tactile keypad to mark your choices, and it still prints out a ballot for you. We work very closely with the United Cerebral Palsy Center of LA on the disability or the accessibility features of this device, and particularly meaningful from my perspective, a number of voters with multiple disabilities who have been active voters their entire adult lives, but also told us that they'd never been able to vote an independent secret ballot. They had always had to have the assistance of a family member, a caregiver, or a poll worker to cast their ballot because the voting system wasn't accessible. We took the prototype of this back after getting their feedback and their input, and were able to watch those same voters use this and vote independently and vote a secret ballot on their own without the assistance of other people, still producing a paper ballot, which is something that has been a real challenge across the nation with voting systems, and so we're very proud of that feature. The other thing to note about this is the ballot marking device addresses some of the issues that have been problems in past elections. So, for instance, you cannot overvote on this. It won't let you overvote. Once you select the number of choices in a particular contest, you cannot overvote.
I'm sorry, what does that mean, overvote?
Overvote is an expression for if you voted for too many candidates in a contest.
I see.
Right.
Thank you.
Which would cancel out your vote.
Got it. Thank you.
It also provides a review at the end when you're done voting, which I think is really important given the length of the ballot. At the end of the ballot, it gives you a review screen. So if you have missed voting on a contest, it's going to prompt you and tell you that you still have remaining choices to be made. That's particularly important in what we call vote for multiple contests, where you can vote for 3 candidates in a particular. If you're cruising through the ballot, voting for one, and you just didn't notice that was a vote for 3 contest, then at the end on the review screen, it's going to let you know you still have 2 choices left on this particular contest, and you can go back and make those choices. Those are features that were not previously available. You do have to, you'll see this when you use it, and this is particularly important in the primary. There is limited space on the screen, so if we have a lot of candidates in one contest, you do have to, there's a flashing button that tells you more. You have to push that in order to see all of the candidates, but again, at the end of the review screen, you're going to see who you selected, and you have the option to go back and change those before you finalize your vote. And that'll make more sense when you have a chance to see it. So key messages, what we're trying to get across, and this is what Congresswoman Waters was emphasizing in her meetings, is that this is a lot of change, and it's a change on something that's been well known and traditional in our community for a long time. So the success of this model is going to depend on our ability to do a really good job with public education and outreach, and that's why we're doing these kind of meetings and trying to get the word out. So some key messages is we're not losing polling places, we're actually gaining vote centers, which means we're increasing
We are
access.
losing polling places.
These vote centers are fully accessible with voting equipment that makes it easier and addresses some of the challenges that existed in the previous environment. It is still a paper-based voting system. In fact, I would argue it's a more intuitive paper voting system because you can actually read the human readable text on your ballot, and where you couldn't do that on the Inca-Vote ballots. It provides 11 days to vote, and we'll be encouraging people to take advantage of that and vote during those early voting periods. So how will we get the message across? We have been doing a series of 10 demonstration centers that are open continuously every week throughout the county. They're spread out throughout the county. They transfer every 3 to 4 weeks. So we're doing that continuously through the end of January, where we have a number of devices like this, and we invite people in, give them a chance to see it, to review the material, go over the new model. That's been successful. We're doing community events. We've been at over 300 plus events and presentations all over LA County. We have a street team that is available to go out and do presentations like this. Many of those we're able to take the ballot marking device with us and give people that hands-on experience. We conducted a mock election at the end of September where we opened 50 vote centers, examples of these vote centers, and have the devices. We had over 6,000 people come out, use the devices, and give us feedback. We did some refinement after that, but it was a very successful event. And then we will, starting in January, we will have our media partnerships where we will have a multimedia campaign that will go continuously through the March election to inform people. So that'll be radio, television, print ads, billboards, traditional kind of PR campaign. We're intentionally kind of waiting till right after the holidays for that, and we want to saturate that in a short period of time where people are hearing it repeatedly and seeing the branding repeatedly. We believe that will be the most effective way of doing that. We'll also be combining that with earned media, doing a number of interviews. There's a lot of interest in what's happening here in California, obviously, with the earlier primary this year. I've already done a number of feature stories with national publications. We'll be encouraging that through our local media as well, and continuing to do events like this. So what I'd like to do is end by showing you a quick animated video that in a much more artful way goes through most of what I just said. It's very short, but it's an example of the kind of outreach material that we are creating and that will be available. This video is an example of something that is available in all 13 languages, so we are very sensitive to the language outreach that we're doing as well. And then after that, I'll open it up to questions.